Hey there, welcome to my quick fix for Wonder Woman 1984. What is a quick fix, you may ask? Well, the fix part is pretty self-explanatory. There are movies and shows that usually are pretty terrible that end up having an intriguing or downright novel premise in which I can see huge amounts of potential go to absolute waste. So instead of letting those properties decay, I try to scrounge up what works about the stories and refine them into a passable, if not downright great version of themselves by way of video essay relaying a summary of those refined ideas. Think Belated Media's What If the Prequels Were Good videos and you'll kind of get the picture. As for what quick means, it's a cruel joke on myself thinking that repairing anything in the DCEU would be easy when in reality it would steadily consume 2 months of my life! It was intended to be a relatively short video, but the number of small details I needed to change radically changed the project into something much bigger, and I'm too stubborn to change the name of the project overall. Wonder Woman 1984 caught my eye for a number of reasons, the least of which the bizarre way it fit into the current DCEU's canon, as well as the cobbled together mess of ideas that all start out really good on paper but get utterly thrown in the trash as time goes on, namely that of the Dreamstone. So welcome one, welcome all, to my attempt to make this entire story make sense. May God have mercy on my soul. So the first thing we are cutting is the opening scene with little Diana, and the idea that truth is an absolute good. Not only is this scene contradictory with what we know about Diana in the first film, but it also set up a payoff that never really was developed throughout the heart of the film. So we take that out, and instead replace it with Diana returning to Themyscira following the events of World War I, arriving in the middle of the Amazonians' yearly Olympic-esque tournament. Her arrival and appearance bring the festivities to a halt, and we are witness to a quiet stare-down between Hippolyta and Diana. We cut to the throne of Themyscira, where the two arrive alone, with other curious Amazonians being kept out by Hippolyta's guards. Diana opens this conversation by unwrapping a parcel at her belt, revealing Ares' helmet, and effectively revealing to Hippolyta that Diana knows her true nature as Zeus's daughter. The two get into a tense, almost argument over why Hippolyta never revealed Diana's true origins. And after some back and forth, Hippolyta reveals she was fearful Diana would die. After all, if Zeus himself could not strike down Ares for good, a weapon forged by him may very well fail just as he did. The fact Diana succeeded is a miracle unto itself and one Hippolyta prayed never need gamble on. Diana revokes that this was in any way Hippolyta's choice to make. Had Diana known from the very beginning, she would have been more intent on striking out to defeat Ares, and quite possibly the Great War may never have come to pass. Many wars may never have come to pass. Hippolyta explains that Ares' corruption is not quite so simple. She may think she ended the war with Ares' defeat, but in reality his corruption runs deep into the hearts of men. Soon enough, they will find new reasons to war, more damnable than the last. It was not Ares that killed Antiope, or Asteria, or any dozens of their greatest warriors before fleeing to Themyscira. Any reprieve created by the deaths of Ares is but a recession of his influence, not a panacea as Diana thinks it is. And now that he's gone, the wars of men will be harder to dispel because Ares lurks in all of their hearts, not among their ranks where he is easily fought. Zeus's weapon was a fool's errand because Ares' poison has already done its job and robbed men of their morality. Diana rejects this and concludes that if Ares' influence lingers in the world of men, then so too must she in order to protect it. Hippolyta begs Diana to say instead. She has done her duty beyond what was even expected of her. She has killed Ares. She need not do more. But Diana is adamant. She must return to the world. If she can save the world, then she must save the world, giving us our first reflection of Steve's last words to her from the first film. When Diana turns to leave, Hippolyta asks if that's all Diana returned for, to throw her victory back in her mother's face. Diana replies that she returned to hear the truth from her mother's mouth, and now that she knows the truth, she knows what she must do. Hippolyta calls after her that the truth will not always suffice. Sometimes you must lie in order to protect what you love, even if it breaks your heart to do so. As Diana walks away, she barely holds back tears. With her out of the room, Hippolyta mumbles, "I just hope it does not break your heart to learn that lesson." We cut to Diana walking onto the beach of Themyscira and sliding right onto the beaches of Normandy as the theme song begins to play and the credits begin to roll. We get effectively sliding diorama shots of Wonder Woman partaking in various wars after that, such as, of course, World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam. This should make up for the lack of opening action scene with young Diana, which was visually meh. And yes, this is a rip from X-Men Origins Wolverine, but that movie was awful and that opening deserves to be in a better one. So I'm putting it in a what-if rewrite of a Wonder Woman film. You know, now that I say that out loud, we trail off during the Vietnam War where we see Diana witnessing an innocent village burning at the hands of American soldiers. Yeah, a bit cliche, but I can't righteously have her see something worse in a film that's marketed with an upbeat 80s vibe. In all honesty, we're already starting out really dour. Diana seems rather affected by this, and the last transition we get is her in civilian clothes being transported out of the country with the retreating American forces. Watching from the deck of an aircraft carrier, she's approached by a high-ranking naval officer who calls Diana by her name. The man is Poya, son of Chief from the first film. They sit on the deck as the carrier sails away, and Poya asks what's wrong, considering Diana looks much less jubilant. His dad always said that she was a woman who only frowned with the weariness of the world on her shoulders. Diana remarks with some amusement that first he steals his father's keen eyes, and then steals his words. Poya doesn't let Diana deflect, however, and insists to know what's wrong. Giving in, Diana admits she's becoming tired of war. When she was chasing Ares, she knew what enemy she had to fight, but now, understanding which side is the enemy keeps getting more and more unclear. Poya recommends that maybe it's time for Diana to take a break from trying to save the world. Even gods need to rest from time to time. She smiles and asks if that's some of his dad's wisdom. Nah, he says. Dad would have told you to fight to the bitter end. But maybe it's about time for her to find a new way to exist in this world where the wars are only getting grayer and grayer. There's more than one way to be a hero. He even offers to help her set up somewhere in the States, considering her situation. Diana contemplates the offer when he's called away by subordinates who call him Chief, the nickname he inherited from his father. Looking out to the ocean, Diana is quiet, and we transition to an ocean painting hanging in a jewelry store in the Landmark Mall during the evening. This is where we get a big old title card telling us it's 1984, and we get our fair dose of 80s memorabilia while panning through the mall. Now, I know a lot of what was actually featured in this film was pretty anachronistic. Most of it was late 80s nostalgia, but this is the DCEU version of 1984, so we can let it be exaggerated for set dressing purposes. After getting a good glimpse of everything in the main section of the mall, including the first silent appearance of Maxwell Lord on the TVs in a shop, we get the lead into the robbery and the reveal of the underground antique smuggling being done by the jewelry store. After successfully robbing the place, one of the robbers, nervous, fumbles his gun and drops it in front of a security guard. The guard approaches and asks if the man is alright, considering he looks shifty, and this serves as a cleaner escalation into the fight scene. Instead of a screaming lady, we get a guard making a good-natured inquiry into why this guy has a gun in a district with such strict gun laws like Washington, D.C. You know, make your time and setting actually work for the story a little bit more? The robber panics and draws the gun on the guard, who backs off slowly with hands up. Now we get our screaming lady, people beginning to panic, and the guy taking the little girl hostage. Several approaching guards radio in the standoff and it proceeds to escalate, to the point that he's holding the little girl over the railing. As she's about to slip, we see Diana's tiara smash all the cameras in the mall's rotunda. From here, we get her intervening in the scene like the normal movie, and we're especially keeping the other robbers having moral concerns over holding the girl hostage. Gives them a little more texture than just one-note antagonists. But yes, Diana quickly defeats them, and one of the few tweaks to choreography were having her keep moving to avoid anyone getting a good look at her, and she's clearly employing non-lethal tactics, taking care that no one is thrown from up high like in the original. Seriously, Diana, falls like that kill people! And that's before smashing them under the weight of another person's body. The police force properly arrive to clean up the mess she left behind, and we fade away as a reporter's voice begins to describe the incident, emphasizing that there's been a mysterious woman enacting vigilante justice in the DC area for almost a year now, and no one can identify her, vanishing too quickly before anyone can get a good look at her. We fade in at Diana's kitchen, listening to the morning broadcast and poring over several old texts, staring at them with increasing frustration. She looks up to her coffee cup and focuses her hand around it. A bubble appears around it, and it vanishes for a split second before reappearing. Diana consults the text, and after a few seconds looks back to the cup. She focuses the energy in her hands and then lays it over the cup, and it stays vanished this time. Diana is ecstatic at her success of having made it invisible, only for it to turn to concern when she moves some of her documents, and we hear a shattering sound as she accidentally knocked the mug off the table. An alarm goes off and she realizes she's late for work. She hesitates between cleaning up the mug and leaving, and opts ultimately to leave, collecting the scrolls and gingerly, but quickly putting them away. We follow her out the door. Along our quick jog to work, we pass a shop selling TVs that gives us our second glimpse of Maxwell Lord, who's giving his signature, "Your life is good, but it can be better" spiel. We cut over to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, where we properly meet Barbara Minerva, who is studying an artifact when she's approached by her boss. Her boss is incredibly short with her about the missing Greek texts from the department, and Barbara assures her that they've only been misplaced and she'll get them later. The boss seems irritated by the answer, but takes it and walks off. When Diana arrives, Barbara greets her and chides her for taking the texts. She can't keep covering for Diana when she goes off with them. Diana apologizes but says that she made some breakthroughs in her personal research and it all paid off. Barbara is happy for her, but begs Diana not to keep putting their jobs on the line. They have a brief exchange that indicates Barbara usually gets the short end of the stick, while Diana is always given preferential treatment by their boss, despite having only been at the Smithsonian about a year. While this might seem like an antagonistic way to start this dynamic, the goal is to let both actresses carry the scene in a way that makes them feel like they've known each other for a while and are rather close friends that can talk openly about frustrations, especially on Barbara's end. But the conversation does shift to a more pleasant topic: Diana's 1 year at the Smithsonian, and Barbara's ideas of how to celebrate it after work. Barbara is rather excited about it, going off into a spiel of how much of a party animal she is, and quickly demonstrating that she's in fact a complete spaz with goofy dance moves. It does put a smile on Diana's face, though. This conversation is interrupted when one of their co-workers takes the opportunity to hit on Diana and invite her out for dinner for the celebration, and Barbara goes apoplectic over how brazenly the guy dismisses their plans outright. Diana gently lets the guy down and says that she's not really in the market to date, and just wants to spend a quiet evening with good friends. The guy leaves, obviously disappointed, and Barbara becomes more focused on the quiet part of the evening, to which Diana smiles and says that they can party some other time. She's had a life filled with bombastic celebrations. Peace and quiet are something that she welcomes. They are interrupted yet again when their boss comes through the door and announces their department will be helping the FBI in identifying and cataloging all the artifacts recovered from the robbery the night before, and that everyone should be prepared to start working overtime starting the next day. Barbara is excited to be working on the project, as she was in the original, but has a comedic bout of emotional whiplash when she realizes that they definitely can't be partying too hard for Diana's anniversary. Diana rolls it off, saying that it's not a big deal, though it's clear after watching the flirty coworker leave that she's feeling conflicted about something. We cut forward to Diana out to dinner with Barbara and Poya, and the three are having a pleasant, though awkward time at a nice open-air restaurant. Most of the unease comes from the dynamic we quickly established between the three. Poya knows who Diana is and is trying to keep it secret from Barbara. Barbara has no clue how to really act normal, and Diana is pining for the, Steve. She's pining for Steve. Most of the early conversation is light, such as Poya's new nickname, the Apache Chief, being given to him because of an incident with the Apache helicopter that he's embarrassed to talk about. In fact, he grouses how annoying that name is, since people that don't know him will assume that he's Apache now, not Blackfoot. The dynamic begins to thaw, but when Diana looks into the glass of her drink, she sees Steve's reflection, only to look behind herself slowly and realize there's no one there. Both Barbara and Poya pick up on this, though Barb is the only one who really digs, and eventually she hits a point where Diana openly admits having been in love once with a man named Steve who was a pilot. Ever since he died, none of the relationships she's tried have really clicked, so she's given up trying altogether. Barbara consoles Diana, but it's obviously brushed off, and we fluff up the end of the scene with a touch of comedy, mostly Barb realizing that Diana is older than she appears, which both Diana and Poya try to cover up with the wise words from Samir, the flirty guy from the first film, who says never to ask a woman her age. We arrive home with Diana, who seems more than a little drained. Her first course of action is to turn to the police radio that she has in the room, listening for crimes that might need her involvement while muttering, "So boys, anything big for me today?" This should imply that she's selective about what crime she's involved in, and we'll get some more elaboration on that later. For now, she walks over to the hutch where she keeps her memorabilia of World War I, including Steve's watch, and becomes distracted, staring at it longingly before setting it down. All of her energy to help goes with it, so she calls it a night, turns off the radio, and passes out on the couch. The next day, we get Barbara carrying a crate through the office and bumping into the coworker from earlier who hit on Diana, causing him to spill his papers. She would drop the crate, but Diana is there to catch it, earning some remarks about her strength from her colleagues, including Barbara. We move on to when Barbara and Diana have matching workstations laid out, and we're introduced to the Dreamstone. This is effectively the same scene we got in the film, only modified to correct for the things that we already changed, such as the friendship dynamic and Diana's relatively recent tenure at the Smithsonian. But for the sake of summary, Barb thinks the Dreamstone is a cheap citrine gem, Diana identifies it as a stone that grants wishes, and one of their co-workers with his unflattering rat tail reaches over to touch it and wish for a coffee. The three smile at the joke, and we shake the scene up just a little bit more from the original. Barb and Diana mumble on about what they'd wish for, but when Diana makes her wish, it's verbal, and she says, "I know what I'd wish for. I'd wish for a life with Steve. A second chance with him. I'd give anything for that." We get the wind effect that signals the wish has been made, and we see Mr. Rattail getting his coffee from a colleague, which makes Diana knit her brows in confusion. Back in her apartment, we see Steve's watch begin to tick again. That night, we have the Barbara in the park scene on our way back to work. We sprinkle in a little more dialogue with the homeless man Leon to make it clear she's working a late shift and only skipped out for some dinner and to give him something to eat. After partying, she only makes it a little ways down the path before she's accosted by a drunkard. The scene plays out basically the same, what with him getting physical and Diana intervening to stop him. Ideally, we'd have a more convincing line read of "forgot my keys" than what Gal Gadot actually gave us. Since, in this circumstance, it's more or less true that she did, and this meeting was a fortunate coincidence for Barbara. But honestly, the dialogue here serves its purpose pretty well. Diana tells Barb to go home, though the still in shock Barbara only agrees out of habit and returns to work instead. At work, the catatonic Barbara starts murmuring to the Dreamstone that she's always been at the bottom of the totem pole. No one respects her. She wishes she could be more like Diana. Confident, athletic, brilliant, sexy. The wind effect goes off, but Barbara doesn't feel any immediate change from the wish and appears to lose that wistful air that had possessed her, dropping the stone to the table in a drained, disappointed frustration. We cut to Diana trying to sleep comfortably, and when she rolls over, she sees Steve over her shoulder in the reflection of her bedside lamp. Of course, when she looks, the image is gone. Sighing dejectedly, Diana lays down to sleep. The next morning we find Barbara in her office, waking up and panicking to look like she hadn't just slept over at the office, and in the process making herself appear more and more attractive. Simultaneously, she discovers her reflexes are much stronger after avoiding the spilled water from a janitor's bucket. Already flustered by her sudden change in reflex and balance, she's even more off-kilter when the same guy that sweet-talked Diana compliments her new look. We transition smoothly into Barbara's first meeting with Maxwell Lord, and what I think is an impressively strong performance by Pedro Pascal in a movie that honestly is a complete mess. This scene is where we largely get into stuff that I've left completely unedited. Maxwell using partnership with the Smithsonian to sneak in and locate the stone, his flirtation with Barbara to get closer to it since she's the resident geologist, Diana first meeting with him and her unease around him, mention of the gala that's coming up, all of that's completely untouched. So is Maxwell arriving at his company to reveal its absolutely abysmal state of affairs and being told at a terrible time that his son is there to see him for the weekend. We get him learning about the new king of crude from the magazine to set up the events in Egypt, and of course the confrontation by Simon, one of the chief investors in the company who's figured out it's a Ponzi scheme with no real future. I thought this scene already did a wonderful job setting up who Maxwell is. A failed oil baron and possible con man. I say possible because he's always come off as genuine with his ambitions, they just outstrip him, who ultimately wants to become someone his son can be proud of. He's a solid character and he's a large part of why I wanted to make this project because damn it, the wasted potential of this character hurts. When Simon leaves, Max gives the whole "I am not a loser" speech to his son, Alistair, before we cut away to Diana hard at work. During part of her research, she discovers that the Dreamstone was intended to go to Maxwell, mainly after inspecting the box it came in. Adding to the scene, we have Mr. Rattail in the background complaining to a coworker how his hair has fallen out in the last day or so, and he doesn't know why. He also adds that he's had this disgusting aftertaste in the back of his throat for days, so he's wondering if he caught something and needs to go see a doctor. Next scene we're keeping is Barbara getting her dress for the gala, though we're definitely cutting it down because it really isn't particularly funny or stunning. Really, it's just there to acknowledge that Barb is now aware that she's becoming more attractive. Jumping to the gala, we keep most of it. Diana arriving and looking for Lord, Barbara arriving and attracting stares, Diana brushing off the advances of a different man who isn't Carl, because he's not going to be important in this, and Lord wooing Barbara into her office so he can steal the stone. There are modifications though. First and foremost, we get a shot of a man in archaic military uniform sneaking in through the door behind Barbara while everyone else is distracted looking at her. Secondly, we have Diana, who is actually following Max and moves to intercept Max and Barbara to confront him about the stone, all while we hear someone trying to call her name while she's zero focused on pursuit. She only stops when someone grabs her arm and she struggles to pull away for a split second, which surprises and confuses her for just a moment. She turns to snap at the person, only to find herself staring at Steve Trevor, still in the outfit he died in back in World War I. It should be clear that all concerns about Max are gone as Diana and Steve kiss in a happy reunion. We cut over to them walking next to the reflection pool talking about what he remembers. He says not much. He recalls taking the plane up and not much more than that. Not even the place that he went after that, which he could feel was great. Next thing he knows, he's waking up, walking towards the gala, no clue what's happening, only that Diana was inside and he just absolutely had to see her. Steve gets caught up that the future time that he's in is 1984, and he sees his first jet since arriving, marveling in the advancement of technology. Now, you may have noticed at this point I haven't mentioned the body Steve is possessing, because, in this version, he's not possessing anyone. That plot point served zero purpose beyond soiling Wonder Woman's name with her disregard for consent later on, so I cut it. They go back to Diana's apartment and slowly begin to catch up, and it gives us time to explore what Diana has been doing for the last few years, as well as have Steve react to some of the more negative aspects of the world since he's been gone, such as the multiple wars since he's been gone, especially mirroring his war to end all wars comment by Diana mentioning World War II. Diana explains that between wars, she's found a passion for archaeology and applied herself as an archaeologist since World War I, going from war-torn country to war-torn country to make a living by day and save the living by night, so to speak. She smiles wryly at the thought that there is quite a few local legends about her, but she always vanishes and changed her identity before almost anyone could catch on. After a while though, she started to realize that both sides of any conflict were just as corrupted by Ares, and she couldn't stand to see their hearts so poisoned. So, Chief's son Poya set her up here, and eventually she wormed her way into the Smithsonian as a cultural anthropologist and archaeologist. She's toned down her heroics for now, keeping an ear to the police scanners to see if there's a bigger problem that they can't deal with on their own. Steve asks after the old crew, and Diana delivers the hard-to-hear news that the original crew members have all passed on. Charlie actually only passed away 2 years prior. But she's close friends with all their families, and she has plenty of people she can trust now across the world thanks to them. Steve is emotionally overwhelmed at the news, but Diana comforts him with a hug and says that they're both with each other now and they can both share in this. Tender kisses begin to ramp up into something more heated when Steve accidentally steps on the invisible mug pieces while walking their way towards the bedroom. We get a bit of comedy here as Diana curses at herself that she forgot to clean it up, and quickly distracts Steve from the invisible mess by dragging him towards her room. We cut over to Black Gold where Maxwell is making his wish, saying he wishes to become the Dreamstone. Wind envelops the room, the stone disintegrates, and Maxwell grabs his head in elation as the wish takes effect. The next morning we find Barb asleep in her bed. She gets up, groggy, and goes to do her morning workout. While there, she discovers a sudden increase in strength to the point she's lifting ludicrous amounts of weight without straining. We're basically just cutting her tearing off her fridge door. I think the implication in the original is that ripping the door off was supposed to be the reason she went to test her strength in the first place, but I think that's honestly a little redundant for what we need to convey. In bed with Diana and Steve, the two have a pleasant morning free of any weird implied non-consensual copulation, because who would be crazy enough to let that happen, am I right? There's some playful debate they should stay in bed all day and enjoy themselves, but they ultimately agree they need to figure out how exactly Steve came to exist again and get out of bed. Finally, with Max, and 11 pages into this script, we can have the main antagonist actually enact his plans. Man, this is a long film. Though you wouldn't necessarily feel it, even the original version moves along at a breakneck pace. There's a lot that happens in this thing. Anyway, Max arrives at Simon's office and tricks him into wishing for the success of Black Gold. Using his position as the stone, Max takes the toll that he wants from Simon, that being his shares in the company and his swift arrest. In quick succession, the cost of the wish comes true and Max flounces out the door past the FBI officers. With Diana and Steve, she takes him to a boutique to get him some clothes, and we have effectively the same getting dressed scene to mirror the one from the original with Diana getting her London clothing. Though with this one, it's pared down for time. Likewise, we don't need Steve gawking at escalators or subways since those things were present in his time, if not incredibly present given how he lived in the first city to have a subway during the war. Punks, breakdancers, and modern art though, those are perfectly fine, if not anachronistic. But again, set dressing for fun. We're especially keeping his reaction to the space display at the Smithsonian because that was legitimately a great scene that really built upon this wow factor that his character was experiencing. Now that things are getting into full swing, we bop over to Max, where he finds his secretary overloaded by the number of calls coming into the office. Turns out the wish worked, and all of his land holdings have struck oil simultaneously. Using his secretary to wish for more help, and having people wander into the office as a result, Max resolves to take one of the interview calls in his office. Meanwhile, Diana and Steve arrive at Diana's office where Barbara is entertaining her coworkers with the discoveries she made that morning and realizing she doesn't need her glasses anymore. Diana introduces Steve, who says he's a pilot, which of course gets Barbara's attention considering this matches the person Diana described back during the anniversary outing. They pull her into an office and ask about the stone, and after some prodding, she reveals that Max Lord borrowed it. This is the first instance of real friction we see between Diana and Barbara, and the tension isn't alleviated by the end of the conversation, when Diana leaves with Steve. We jump to outside Black Gold being sworn by reporters, a presence that'll maintain itself throughout the duration of the film. Diana and Steve resolve to sneak into the back, and Diana's first attempt to break the lock on the shipping door fails with a single tug. She's a bit confused, but after leaning more into the pole, she rips it off cleanly and they get inside. This will be the first instance of Diana's powers really weakening. Here's where we shake things up a little bit. Instead of immediately cutting to them finding Max's office, they're almost caught by workers, but they're given a hiding spot by Alistair. Alistair later explains that he likes to play hide and seek in the office all the time with the nice desk lady so he doesn't end up bothering his dad, though now the place is a lot more busy so it's been harder for him to find someone to actually play with. We get a little dynamic where Diana speaks kindly to Alistair and convinces him to lead them to his dad's office so that no one will notice. He takes him through some of the unfinished ductwork and they arrive in Max's office. They don't find the stone, but Diana does find the ring inscribed with the language of the gods that was fitted around it. She explains that there are items made by the gods empowered by the virtues the gods inhabited, such as the lasso of truth, and the stone must have been one of them. Additionally, she finds plenty of research notes on ancient relics and weird news reports, such as sightings of people performing incredible feats such as Heracles, Asteria, and of course, Diana. But more impactful are some thesis papers from Diana's early years as an archaeologist under several of her old aliases that hypothesize about the real possibilities of magical artifacts. She explains that it was a vain attempt to ease people into the knowledge of the magical world, but all of her research was laughed out of the room as parlor tricks and her credibility under those names kept getting ruined. She gave up trying by the time World War II rolled around, but she never expected someone would dig them up and possibly believe them. She uses the desk phone to call Barbara and put a query out on where the stone came from, and following that, they ask Alistair where his dad was heading. Alistair says Egypt and that his dad promised to bring him back a whole pyramid to play with. Seeing the numerous articles on the new king of Crude who lives in Egypt, Diana puts the pieces together. She pulls up the phone again and starts making a call. Steve asks who she's calling, and she just says, "We need to get to Egypt, and you don't have a passport." I can't do a very good Diana impression. I'm sorry, people. We cut to a parking lot where Diana and Steve are met by Poya. Introductions are briefly made, Poya stares in shock at Steve, and Diana asks if he's done what she's asked. Unhappy, he hands over a thick binder of instructions for the fastest jet they have on the nearby naval base, an F-111 Aardvark. He tells Diana she's playing a dangerous game with this, but if the situation is as severe as a magic artifact on the loose, he'll take his chances with treason. If anything, it'll be the first time his dad would be happy he joined the military. Steve flips open the binder, and Poya points out where he highlighted the startup procedure and the most vital information they'll need to know. Diana thanks him for the help, but he rolls it off quickly, stating that doing this won't be easy. The jet's fueled, but getting it off the tarmac is in their hands. Diana thanks him anyway, and the two leave. We get a quick series of cuts as they sneak into the base and into the cockpit of the plane, with Steve making sure Diana still has the binder with her just in case he gets something wrong. Thankfully, they get the plane started with little issue, and they begin taxiing on the straightaway. Of course, the base around them notices, the alarm is raised, and we get the little exchange where Steve thinks they'll make a clean getaway, but Diana remembers radar is a thing. Diana's solution to this is to tap into that cloaking power she's been practicing earlier, explaining that she was trying to learn how Zeus guarded Themyscira for so long. With the cloaking done, the pair pass through a fireworks display for the 4th of July, and they take off over the ocean. It's such an incredibly beautiful moment shared between these two, and it's making me feel all lovey-dovey. So let me use that soft, cushy feeling in my heart to thank the over 20 patrons that have joined my Patreon in the last few months. Woo lad. Here we go. Thank you to Traxathon, Jared Geyser, Bud the Chud, Dave Gipe, Dio Brando, Jonathan, Ash, Mitchell Brown III, Cameron Delk, Scott Campbell, Dylan Cryer, Night Hunter 11, Keenan Lull, Luthi, Emerald Greens, GQ Smith, Lewis Unger, Porky, Bluebow 501, Coxie, The Kickstarter Logo Platinum Rose, Emily Yokel, Arctic Arduino, Exarch of Justice, and Applicants. Thanks to each and every single one of you, and I'm so sorry it took so long to get a proper video out to credit you guys verbally. I could not do any of this without you guys. Remember that for $1 or more you get access to the Team Frostbite Discord server where I, as well as many of my YouTube collaborators, hang out on the regular. We have fun event nights and you often get a sneak peek of new projects we're working on. I can't wait to see all you newbies in there, and by now I probably already have, honestly. This project has taken way too long, and I hope to see even more of you join up in the future. Now, back to the movie. Back with Barbara, we find her in the FBI archives, researching the stone and being abrasively curt to the guy helping her. We then follow her out of the archives as she's on her way home. She runs into her assaulter, and this scene plays out exactly as it did before, a perfect encapsulation of Barbara realizing the power she has and quickly becoming drunk on it to the point she kills the man, only coming to her senses when Leon, the homeless man, calls out to her. She flees, and Leon goes to check on the assaulter who, let's be honest, is probably pretty dead after all of that. We cut to Cairo, establishing Diana and Steve have arrived in the jet via overhead shots, before swapping over to the central compound of Sinbad Abydos, the new king of Crude, where Max is quick to convince the man to make a wish. Wishing for his ancestral lands back, Max intends to take the man's oil as the cost, only to be told it's all been sold to the Saudis. So instead, Max takes Abydos' personal protection contracts, gaining his guard detail and leaving as a massive wall is erected around Abydos' ancestral lands. Abydos is terrified when he realizes that his wish has been granted and the world begins to recognize his sovereign rule of the territory. With Diana and Steve is restless in the back of the taxi as they're going down a long strip of road. He asks if they're not going completely out of their way, and Diana reassures him that this is the only road out to Abydos' compound. This little line lessens the coincidence when their car passes Max's convoy on the road. Thus ensues the road fight scene, which is mostly alright. Mostly just shaking up the choreography a bit so it's clear Diana handles the mercenaries non-lethally, so the mercenaries don't risk friendly fire on the guy they're trying to protect, and no stupid RPG flight thing that Diana does. This isn't campy. This is stupid. To this extent, arguably the largest change we're making is at the very end of the chase, which is bad for so many reasons. Instead of kids playing in the middle of the street, they only start that way, and when they see the convoy fight approaching, they and their families flee indoors. The threat to innocent lives comes when Steve saves Diana's life by ramming one of the APCs trying to crush her, sending it careening out of control off the road towards the homes. Still clinging to the side of the APC itself as it veers that direction, she uses her lasso to snag the windmill, catapulting herself around the windmill at the house and swing around to kick the side of the APC. The APC veers into the remainder of the convoy and Diana loses her grip on the lasso, collapsing into the dirt. Max escapes down the road with his security detail, his headache growing with his desires as he asks who the next closest person with oil is. Diana and Steve recover from the chase, with Steve pointing out Diana isn't healing like she did back in the war. Still noticeably faster than a normal human, but much slower than normal for her. Diana is equally more winded as they see helicopters fly overhead. News reports filtering in inform us that Max Lord has come to possess half the world's oil, and while we hear this, we transition to the Smithsonian office. Diana's co-workers are watching the unfolding international events, while Barbara is steeped deep in research. She receives a call from Diana, and she's quick to explain she's found references to the stone from all across the globe, though all those leads are dead. The only one that's still alive is Baba Jide, a self-proclaimed Mayan shaman. They agree to meet at Jide's the following morning. When Diana hangs up, she explains that all of Barbara's leads found the stone in civilizations right before they collapse, which only intensifies her growing concerns. The next day, Diana and Steve land back in DC and meet Barb at Baba Jide's. Before they go in, Barb hesitates but ultimately confronts Diana about magic, how the stone might actually be real, and if it is, it makes her ask who Diana is exactly. Before Diana can properly respond to any of that, Jide answers the door. Jide shows them a tome kept by his great-great-grandfather that makes mention of the stone as well as the creator Dolos, the god of trickery, cunning deception, craftiness, and guile. It also describes the Mayans' observations on the stone's workings. It grants the wish of whoever holds it, but extracts a price in return, and as time goes on, the wish it grants sours to the point it's more akin to a curse. Ultimately, the stone feeds on the most valuable thing someone has to lose, and the misery created by false promises. In short order, they figure out that Lord wished to become the stone, and if the only solutions offered by the book are renouncing the wishes or destroying the stone, Barbara immediately begins to object to killing Max, which Steve is adamant they might have to do in order to stop the stone. She ends up asking why they even need to stop the stone in the first place. The stone's been around for centuries. Just because it's been used a couple of times doesn't mean the world is going to end. Diana argues back that Max seems to be accelerating things and they don't know where that's going to take them, and Barbara asks if she's really taking Steve's side on all of this. Before Diana can respond, Barb continues that of course Diana is taking Steve's side. Why would you bring someone back from the dead and not listen to them, right? We get a brief comedic moment where Babajide just looks to Steve confused and asks, "Wait, you were dead?" Diana slams her hands on the table and says that they don't need to undo the wishes. They just need Max to stop granting them before it gets out of control. When Barbara says that they could just talk him down, Diana argues that it may not be an option. Men are easily corrupted when they get too much power. Barbara argues that maybe the wishes are making people's lives better. Maybe the costs are worth it. If the wishes were so bad, why doesn't Diana renounce hers right now? Diana looks to Steve and chokes, allowing Barbara to continue her tirade that Diana is just as corrupt, just as selfish, and if she's going to have her wish granted, then everyone else should have theirs granted too. Diana only just starts to speak back, only for Barbara to storm off and leave. Diana moves to go after her, but Steve holds her back. Behind them, Babajide looks to Steve again and repeats, "So, you were dead?" We jump over to Black Gold, where Max is continuing to degrade, both physically and mentally, as the desire to grant more wishes is slowly consuming him. He's lined up several major global businessmen, leaders, and personalities to grant wishes on, but is angered to learn that he has Alistair for the night again, since his ex-wife had a prior arrangement that day. Alistair overhears the argument and runs away from the office as Max realizes his mistake, looking to move past it quickly by buying Alistair a race car. He goes through a long procession of people, granting wishes but visibly decaying the entire time before he declares he needs to touch a lot of people at the same time. He sends the person he's with out and has Alistair sent in. He and Alistair have a, well, not a heart-to-heart really, more like Max gets to talk about how great he's becoming, how close he's getting to becoming number one. A miscommunication ends with Alistair wishing for Max's greatness, which automatically gets granted. Max panics over what he sees as a waste of a wish and embraces his son, reassuring him that one day everything will make sense. However, Max continues degrading, bleeding from the ear. He leaves Alistair with one of his aides and goes outside to make someone wish for an audience with the president for him, but is accidentally waylaid because the person he went to manipulate a wish out of has already been granted one. Presumably he finds someone to grant that wish, and we cut to him outside with his driver, granting a wish that makes traffic part like the Red Sea. Sadly, we are going to have to cut Calman from this version of the story. Clearly, he was an artifact from a different storyline where Max was running around granting wishes to random people, so he must go bye-bye. We still keep a fraction of that scene as we learn from a news report that there are riots breaking out from protests over the situation in Egypt, a fact backed up by people running scared past the Smithsonian and black smoke in the horizon. Diana and Steve arrive at her office while looking for Barbara, and we get their argument about whether it's really okay to let Steve stay. Even though Steve is arguing actively to be poofed away, Diana simply circles back that once they get to Max, they can figure things out for real, which does very little to satisfy Steve's concerns. Frustrated, Diana uses her phone to begin making calls and pointedly ignores Steve's concerned stare. Poya is the last person Diana calls and the only one who answers. They exchange brief concerns about Barbara, but he can't help considering the riots erupting in town are keeping everyone on base for safety concerns. With the conversation over, Diana admits that she could be anywhere, and the two resolve to deal with Max first. There's a cute comedic moment where Steve starts to list off all the different methods they can employ to track him down, only for them to pass a TV set up in the office playing a segment on Max Lord getting a meeting with the president. Diana makes a wry quip about maybe buying a TV in the future before the two of them take off out the door. We jump to Max arriving at the White House where he gets a meeting with the president. When Max warms him up to asking for a wish, the president says he'd most want peace across the world, with the US at the top at any cost, and Max in return takes his authority and command for himself. The souring of this wish, we'll later learn, is that peace at any cost means an immediate launch of all of America's nuclear missiles across the globe, and Russia's retaliation in kind. America will exist as Lord of a Graveyard. It's still not enough for Max, who's beginning to suffer from nosebleeditis. He walks to one of the nearby aides and demands he wish that there was a way for Max to touch the entire world at once. When the aide makes the wish, another aide bursts into the room carrying a presentation on a segment of the new Star Wars missile defense program, a global broadcast satellite that would allow Max to do exactly what he wants. Ecstatic at the news, he orders full access to the program and a chopper to get to the installation. Intricate with all this is Diana and Steve breaking into the White House, with Diana leaping across the lawn and into the building by breaking a lock. All of this seems to be taking a toll on her, and Steve asks if she's still up to do this. And she says that she still can do it, but it's just taking more and more effort as time goes on. And from here we get the full fight at the White House with Diana and Steve confronting Max, fighting off the Secret Service and almost catching him when Barbara arrives to save him. Barbara is sporting her new look and cheetah print clothes. The rest of the fight and dialogue are relatively unchanged. Barbara manages to subdue Diana and Steve, allowing Max to run and Barbara to have a final ideological confrontation with Diana, one that now makes a little more sense given their argument back at Baba G Days. Barbara takes off to join Max, leaving Diana alone with Steve. With the president, we learn about the nukes launching and we see people around the Capitol begin to break into panicking, rioting, looting.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
Diana and Steve limp out of the White House and find a spot to rest among the chaos. This is where we launch into the Diana needs to renounce her wish speech, and finally convinced that she needs to do so, they say their farewells, and she takes off running down the road, renouncing her wish as she goes. The big change here is that she doesn't begin to fly. Because why? That was never her power set as established in the films prior or subsequent to this one, so just why? Why throw that in there at random? Instead, she comes to a stop at the Lincoln Memorial, bracing herself against one of the pillars as she looks back towards the reflection pool behind her, both in longing for Steve and confirmation of the return of her powers. Hardening herself, she looks forward and takes off running again. We cut to Barbara and Max talking about the nature of their wishes and how they're more of a curse than anything. Barbara admits that she wants more, that what she wished for wasn't enough, which amuses and impresses Max. He leans over and says he'll tell her a secret. The wishes come with a gift receipt and store credit. Laughing at his own little analogy. All she has to do is renounce her old wish and wish on him, and he'll give her exactly what she wants. Barbara hesitates but ultimately reaches out to take his hand. This is where Barbara confidently says that she wants to be better than whatever Diana is. A true apex predator, something more than human. They arrive at the facility, get the broadcast going, use an extra wish from one of the military dudes to ensure that it works for Max, and we transition smoothly into Max's speech. We get a spread across the world of people watching and making wishes as per his request, including his son who is uselessly screaming at one of the computers back at Black Gold. We get a brief cut to the stretch of forest where Diana and Steve landed their plane when we hear a jet engine taking off. Interspersed back to back with Barbara in the back of the satellite bunker starting to mutate and grow fur along her skin. With the wind building in the room to indicate an infusion of power, Max begins calling out what he's taking as prices for his wishes, revitalizing himself almost completely in the span of seconds. In the middle of this, Barbara, mid-transformation, cries out in pain and flees the room. She barrels into a bathroom and we get a touch of body horror as her nails shift in the claws and her bones begin to twist and change from the inside out. In the skies above the installation, the soldiers on duty hear the whine of a jet as suddenly the dish above them explodes. A moment later, Diana lands in front of them, having crashed the invisible jet into the tower and kicked off the last action sequence of the film. Inside, the broadcast goes dead and the wind begins to dissipate. Panicking, Max walks to the nearest soldier and grabs his shoulders, demanding he wish to restart the broadcast. Outside, Diana deals with the soldiers as non-lethally as she can, entering the compound. In short order, she finds herself in a hallway with flickering lights, a consequence of the crash, and at the end of it is Barbara, who has fully transformed into Cheetah. The two clash, brawling their way out of the hallway, Diana forced back out of the building and into the jungle surrounding the installation. Hopping from tree to tree, Cheetah keeps ahead of Diana's attempts to use her whip, and her claws sink easier into Diana's flesh than any bullet. By every appearance, Barbara matches Diana tit for tat, if not completely outclassing her. But more important than any choreography is the ideological battle of wishes versus their cost, with Barbara arguing that she's happier now than she's ever been. She has control. She feels alive. Everything makes more sense, and no one can get in her way. Not a soul alive will be able to ignore her now. Diana begs for Barbara to look at herself. Sure, no one will be able to ignore her anymore. But who will feel like they can actually love her, care about her? By sacrificing her humanity for her dream, she's giving up all the good that that dream could give her. Barbara rages against it, that her humanity never gave her the strength to stand up for herself, to make herself special, to which Diana quickly rebukes that Barbara was special. She was an accredit to her field. Every person she met, even if they didn't realize it, had their lives improved by her because of how giving she was. And most importantly to Diana, Barbara was her friend. Caught off guard by Diana's words, Cheetah is pinned and feebly resists Diana's hold, clawing at her bracers and shoulders. She suffers a breakdown, admitting she hates Diana. She's been perfect at everything and always outshined her at every turn. Gorgeous looks, incredible intellect, superhuman strength, a perfect life. Diana turns it on her by stating that she doesn't have a perfect life. Of all the happiness in her life, those things that Barbara listed have only brought her fleeting moments. The things she's treasured most were made by being kind, and every time without fail, she's outlived them. In the end, all those things that Barbara admired have been curses, not blessings, which is why Diana can't understand why Barbara would even think to make the wish that she did. Barbara stops resisting against Diana's grip and stares at her, falling non-responsive. Looking Diana in the eye and resting a hand on Diana's, Barbara reluctantly renounces her wish. Diana lets go and Barbara falls to the ground, her skin returning to normal, and we use some creative camera angles to keep her naughty bits covered. I mean, she wasn't wearing any clothes as Cheetah, so she's not exactly going to grow that stuff back. Barbara, only really half there mentally anymore, explains that Max needs the wishes, that he's getting something from them, and he looks like he's suffering when he's not granting them. She also offers a weak apology. For what, it's not really elaborated on, but Barb isn't exactly in the right mental state to elaborate. Diana thanks Barbara and then enters the facility. Inside, we get roughly the same confrontation between Diana and Max, where he uses the force of the wind produced by the granted wishes to keep her at bay. Diana destroys the camera, but by this time Max has already completely bypassed needing to use it, stepping dramatically into the weird light beam to emphasize his direct connection to the world. Again, a battle of wills ensues, with Max arguing that people should continue to wish and wish and wish. Why not? He's figured out his loophole to the wishes, how to keep any downsides at bay, but Diana argues that no one can escape the price of their wish. It'll take what is most valuable to the wisher in the end. She begs to know what he paid for his wish, and he is quick to say that it cost him nothing, though the first indications of concern cross his face. Diana presses it for him to think of what he holds most dear, of what the stone would take as a cost for a wish so grand. His wealth, his prestige, his family. Max freezes and mutters Alistair's name. Blinking like he's just woken up, he asks where Alistair is, steadily breaking into a panic. Diana says his son is probably still in DC. Right where Russia has doubtlessly sent one of their deadliest nukes. We cut to Alistair out among the panic in the streets as the light from a missile approaches in the distance. Back with Max, he breaks into a fit of panic over Alistair, and Diana assures him that he can save his son if he just renounces his wish. Max hesitates only for a moment before going to renounce his wish, only to choke on the word renounce. He tries and tries and tries again, failing each time, unable to squeeze out the words. Falling to his knees, he says that he can't. The stone won't let him. He's granted too many wishes to let it all get reversed. Back with a listless Alistair, we see the missile getting closer, with most people having completely fled. Diana, thinking quickly, unravels her lasso and throws it into the wind current so that it catches on Max's arm. She yells for him to tell the truth, to tell her what he most wants. He shouts that he wants to see his son, and we get snippets of moments where Max was a little boy, seeing his poor, abusive upbringing. He shouts he wants to be someone his son can look up to, and we're treated to clips of his hard work in school and the start of Black Gold. Finally, he shouts that he wants to renounce his wish, and we cut to Alistair on the roadway as the missile flies overhead and explodes. The explosion is cut short, however, freezing in midair, before it's sucked back into itself, and the missile reforms. In quick succession, we see as time reverses, as every wish Max has granted is completely undone, leading all the way back to Max making his initial wish. Normal time resumes as Max is about to make his wish, only to drop the Dreamstone from his hands like it's on fire. He stares at it, wiping his brow of terrified sweat. Running out the door, he scrambles across the city to his home with his driver. Inside, he rushes to Alistair's room and finds the boy groggily waking up in his bed from all the noise his father was making. Elated, Max rushes to his son's side and hugs him tight, giving his spiel about being a messed up loser guy to his son and apologizing for being a bad dad that he can't be proud of. Alistair says he already loves his dad regardless, and Max holds him close. We cut away from him to find Diana waking up in her bed to the noise of her phone ringing, one side empty of Steve's presence. She reaches over and rubs her hand through the sheets but reluctantly stands up. Picking up the phone, Barbara mumbles out a meek greeting, and there's some lingering awkwardness between the two as she explains that Max called her and asked to meet them both at the Smithsonian. Diana agrees, and we shift over to her office, where the three are crowding around the stone. Max elaborates that he doesn't want to hold on to it. He doesn't want anything to do with it ever again. Barbara reaches for it, only to pull back, looking to Diana for answers. Diana picks up the stone and looks to Barbara, asking Max if making another wish is possible. Barbara begins to vigorously shake her head yes, and actually looks away in shame, as Max explains that the stone can grant one wish at a time, but you can renounce one and ask for another. Having bent the stone, he understands that it needs to feed on the cost that come with the wish, both the upfront ones and the hidden ones. Even if you cycle through 100 wishes, the stone will eventually get what it needs, and make sure you pay the price for what you get. Diana flips it between her fingers before putting it back in its box and sealing it up. Barbara asks if it's weird that they all remember what happened, even though time has clearly gone backwards. Max wondered that himself, but points out that all of them made wishes on the original stone, not on him. Everything he caused was undone. Max stares at the box with a reflective and wary look before abruptly thanking the girls for their time and wiping his hands of all this. He leaves it in their very capable possession. Diana asks where he's going when he heads towards the door, and very frankly he admits he needs to go and try and salvage his company. After all, he says, looking to Diana, if he wants to make his son proud, he needs to start somewhere, right? Diana watches him leave, and we get a quiet heart-to-heart between Diana and Barbara. Diana reassures Barb of what she's worth, and people not seeing it is their problem, not hers. And whatever problems Barbara has, Diana will be there to help her see it through. Barbara appreciates it, but says that she's going to try and do more on her own. Now that she's had a taste of what it's like to stand up for herself, she feels like it might not be so unreachable. The two are interrupted as Mr. Rattail and the guy that hit on Diana walk through the door to the office, with Rattail emphatically talking about this really wild dream he had involving riots and nuclear weapons, and the guy that hit on Diana commenting on how insane that all sounds. Barb and Diana smile to each other wryly and we cut away. We next pick up at an auction where Max is selling off what assets he has left to pay off what debts he owes, and it's clear that he's getting more and more desperate as the bids aren't exactly exciting. Then, when going down to see what's left to offer, one of his assistants hands him a box and a note. The note reads, "Life is good, but it can be better." And inside the box is Steve's watch in pristine condition with a note about its estimated worth. The assistant says that there was an anonymous donation of a bunch of World War I artifacts to their auction drive. Max looks up from the crowd to find Diana smiling at him from the back of the auditorium. She leans out the door and we follow her as she meets up with Poya, who asks if she's really willing to go through with it. Diana says that it's time that she moves on. Steve always talked about the other good men in this world, and she thinks that he'd be fine helping out Max now that he's got his head on straight. Poya says that she's taking a risk on a guy like Lord, and she says that she knows, but she trusts the power of love will lead him true in the end, just like it did when he made his choice. Poya is still disbelieving of Diana's story, huffing in amusement over the idea of invisible planes and magic satellites. Sounds like a wild time. The camera focuses in on Diana's face as he talks about it, her expression drawn in consternation. We cut over to Themyscira where Hippolyta is holding the Dreamstone. Diana stands beside her, overlooking the ocean. Hippolyta muses about the crystal and how Dolos delighted himself in messing with man, or more accurately, having man mess with himself. This toy of his was made for his own amusement, and while she never knew it to have a sinister design, it is clear that the stone could wreak a great deal of destruction among the world of man. She turns to Diana and says what Diana has asked to do carries a great deal of risk. In the best scenario, all she'll be doing is kicking the problem down the proverbial road, and at worst she may invite a greater danger upon the world. Diana replies that it's her fault in the first place that the stone was discovered. Other artifacts like this are still out there and could be abused without anyone realizing it until it's too late. No. Diana knows this is the right course of action. Hippolyta rests a hand on Diana's shoulder, saying that it's always the most difficult decision to make, to leave things the way they are or to change them, hoping that whatever choice made leads to a better world, or at least to one not racked by disaster. She hands the stone to Diana and pauses before leaving, saying that she's proud of Diana, and she knows her daughter will make the right choice in the end. With that, Hippolyta takes her leave. Diana briefly enjoys the summer breeze before taking out the photograph of her, Steve, and the World War I crew. She stares somberly at the photograph in one hand, hefts the Dreamstone in the other, and closes her eyes. With conviction in her voice, she wishes that all magic, all works of the gods be hidden from the realms of man to protect it from the corrupting powers that be. The wind picks up around her and the stone turns to sand in her hand, scattering to the wind. A second later, Diana's photograph is snatched from her by the wind, floating through the air before disintegrating as well. Diana whispers, "Goodbye, Steve." And we cut to credits. In the after credits, we see Diana working at the Louvre in the present, struggling with a heavy set of boxes to indicate that she's actually much weaker now that her powers are gone. She walks past her coworkers as they watch the first news coming in of the Metropolis fight between Superman and Zod from Man of Steel. Seeing the widespread destruction, Diana leaves work, rushes to her apartment, and opens the place she stored all of her old equipment. Looking up into the camera and closing her eyes, Diana renounces her wish, and we cut to black on the version of Wonder Woman's theme song from Batman vs. Superman. Cut, print, done. Holy crap. Well, there we go. Wonder Woman 1984, now with 100% less questionable consent and 50% more logic to how the Dreamstone works. In the original, the function of the Dreamstone fluctuated and raised questions all over the place. In this version, we can extrapolate much more cleanly that the stone itself has a level of sentience to it, and when it's in its base form, it takes its time with wishes and consequences. When Maxwell takes control, he accelerates the speed at which the rules operate, and the strain of being the stone seems to come with a severe physical cost that requires a constant granting of wishes. Likewise, characters got a little bit of an overhaul. Barbara now has a much more compelling arc. Her inferiority complex no longer depends on meeting and befriending Diana within like a day. Instead, it's something that has clearly been building over the course of the year that they've known each other, and has been catapulted to a head by a traumatic encounter in the park and a throwaway wish. Diana has likewise had the weird truth messaging of this film expunged. I mean, I agree that the truth is almost always an absolute good in the long run. But the idea of balancing truth and lies as a short-term solution for problems and the consequence of that choice is much more compelling for a story like this. The fact she didn't tell Barbara her true nature led directly to Barbara's resentment. Her telling the truth about magical artifacts led directly to Max obtaining the stone. Her convincing Max to be honest about what he really wants in life is what solves the problem all around, and her lying to herself about keeping Steve around almost costs her ability to save the world. She learns that regardless which path she takes, there will ultimately be consequences to both, and she ultimately learns to measure the pros and cons. Max, meanwhile, just got some tweaking. Overall, he stayed the same as probably the most compelling element of the original film. A man propelled by a malformed sense of fatherly pride twisted into an obsession for more and more power. Him coming to his senses and simply embracing the reality of his business, his desires, his personhood, all create a great punctuation for the film, and the hope of redemption fits in line with Diana's more kind-hearted solutions to dealing with the problems in her world. Hopefully you've enjoyed this ride. I put a lot of work in here, and so did my smaller team of Sketchy Huntsmen, who did an absolutely wonderful job bringing some of these great moments to life. Please check all these guys out in their personal works. They've been an absolute asset to making this project as fun as it was. And if you're interested in joining the team, auditions for Fixing Ruby Volume 5 are open until May 5th, 2021, so I'd love to see some of you send in submissions. You can find those audition details in the link down below. But that's all I have for you guys today. If you liked that video, be sure to hit that like button, ring that bell, and leave a comment below telling me just how much you enjoyed yourself. Or, if you hated it, please let me know why. I'm always open to creative criticism, painful as it may be. Who knows, maybe one day I'll tackle a different DCEU film. Lord knows that franchise needs some work. But those are thoughts for another day. I've been Raymond McNeil, the Celtic Phoenix, bringing movies back from the dead. I'll catch you all on the flip side.